Hi, my name is Craig Yuranek, and I wanted to give you a summary of section 1.1. Before I do that, I want to give you a brief outline of what the pattern of the whole entire book is going to be. You can see in table 1 here that we have a Camaro's production in the year 1996. The production was 67,000 cars, etc. In the entire book, what we will be doing is we will be taking data similar to data from this table, and we will be taking that data and converting it to an equation or to a graph. Once we can model it, is what we'll be calling it. Once we can model the data and convert it into a graph or an equation, then we'll be able to make predictions and estimates. And so this is going to be the pattern of the entire book. So therefore you'll need to start out with some skills. Skill number 1 would be, of course, to be able to read table data, would be able to convert it into an equation on a graph, and that's where we will begin. So in this section 1.1, we'll be using qualitative graphs to describe situations. Let's begin with an example. And we're going to, in particular, talk about what's the difference between a qualitative graph and a quantitative graph. You can see before you that we have a quick little graph or sketch or a curve of the stock market. Now, can you answer a question like, did it do good or bad? Well, you actually can, because if you'll look at the beginning spot versus the ending spot, it definitely went up. So we can answer that question. That's a question that has to do with the quality. So therefore, it's a qualitative graph or sketch. Now, if I wanted quantitative, it would need to be able to answer questions like, how good did it do? Well, I don't know. What's missing? It would have to be able to answer questions like, what was the time span? So you can see that qualitative has to do with quality, quantitative, quantity, or hard numbers, the facts. So, in summary, qualitative has to do with a quick summary of a situation. With the quantitative graph, you will be able to talk about hard numbers, the data, the facts. Now, what kinds of things are we going to be looking at in the future that will make it quantitative? We will have to add scales eventually, labels, we'll need tick marks, we'll need numeric values, etc. But right now we'll be working on qualitative graphs. Let's begin with an example. To give an example of sketching a qualitative graph, we will go to page 6 of your text and work problem 14. It reads as follows. A person went for a run. After a while, she stopped to rest. She then walked home. Let S be her speed in feet per second at T minutes after she began her run. So in this problem, we have a girl who runs for a distance, rests, and then walks the rest of the way home. So to represent this data with a qualitative graph, we'll have to do the following. First, we'll draw the two axes that will represent the data. The data is going to be her speed and the time since she began. The next thing we'll have to do is identify, do I put time or speed on this axis? Do I put time or speed on this axis? So I have to identify where the variables go. This is done by identifying the dependent and independent variables. Now, to find those, you ask a question. I'm going to ask the question the wrong way on purpose the first time. The question will be, does the time after she began her run depend on her current speed? Well, obviously not. So let's phrase it the opposite way. Does her current speed depend on the number of minutes, the time, or the number of minutes after she began her run? Yes, it does. Because after so many minutes after her run, she might have been resting or walking or running. So Once we've done this, we found out that speed is a dependent variable, and it depends on how many minutes after she began running, which is the independent variable. What's commonly known as the y-axis is going to be the axis for the dependent variable. So therefore, her speed will be on this axis. The independent variable will lie on this axis, which is time. So we will put it here. Now, we'll always want to label what these variables represent. So this was the time, or the number of minutes after she began her run. So I'll put minutes after beginning the run. Now, we won't need any tick marks because this is a qualitative graph. So for this section, and probably this section alone, there will be no numbers, no tick marks. Now, this represents speed that looks like in feet per second, so I should write that. Feet per second. Now, again, we don't have actual numbers or values, so we'll just represent it. If she began her run, she probably started at 0 speed. So therefore, the initial beginning of the run probably starts here. She probably starts jogging quickly and starts slowing down and goes to a steady pace for a while. Then you can see in the question, after a while, she stops to rest. So she'll slow down and come down to a speed of 0. She'll rest for a time. We don't know how long, but she'll rest for a time, and then she will walk back home. So she will start up again and probably not go as fast. And eventually she will reach her destination. So there we have an example of sketching a qualitative graph. Again, the first thing you will have to do is find out which the dependent variable is and the independent variable so that you can label the graph. And again, to identify those, you simply use the question. Does this variable depend on this one, or is it the other way around? Once you do that, you simply sketch it as shown. This concludes what I wanted to summarize for section 1.1. However, whenever you go over a section, when you finish it up, you really should go revisit the objectives for that section. So here they are. I have not covered all of these in detail, but you would need to be able to, after this section, use a qualitative graph to describe a situation. The direction I went was I started with a situation and converted that into a qualitative graph. But you would also have to be able to do the reverse. You'd have to take a qualitative graph and describe the scenario or the situation that's occurring there. If you sketch that graph, you'll have to be able to do objective 2. Identify the independent variable and dependent variable. Again, the dependent variable is the one that will go on that y-axis. The independent variable will be the one that goes on the x-axis. You also need to understand the meanings of intercept, increasing, and decreasing curves. Now, as far as that fifth objective, I'm not going to hold you responsible for that one in this chapter. So there you have it. Now you should be able to complete your homework, and if you have any questions, make sure that you bring those to class next time.